Winnipeg Jets ownership sounds the alarm on attendance. Not going to work over the long haul. The issues with the Winnipeg Jets and their attendance are well documented. They're drawing 87.4% of capacity. That's third lowest in the National Hockey League. And they already play in the smallest rink, excluding the Mullet Arena. And the overall average attendance has also been down as well. There's a lot going on with this team in terms of the fans in the building, which is really wild considering how good they've been all year. CJ, let's talk about your conversation with Mark Chipman. How did it come about? What can you tell us from what went down? Let's start to break it down.
Sure. Well, look, there's a lot of layers to a story like this, right? And, I think the biggest thing is the origin of the story for me, Julian, was all the way back in October. And I know we talked about it here on the CJ show, just about those first 3, 4, 5 games. You're almost shocked to look at the box score and see the attendance the Jets were getting right out of the gate. Just because, they had 11 years in a row of sellouts, nearly 332 straight sellouts when that team returned after the move back from Atlanta. And so we weren't accustomed to this. And so at that point in time, I started working on a Jets story, reached out to the team, kind of went on the back burner for, things come up. But there was an ongoing conversation, I guess I would say, about doing a story on this and if they'd be willing to talk about it. I think that was always, from my end, what would be most interesting. I mean, we could obviously break down the numbers and point out that there's challenges here, but actually hearing, from ownership in terms of their thoughts and what they're doing to address the problem, to me, was going to be the story. And ultimately it came in February here. I had a chance to go out. They gave me a couple games, where I could go to the game and speak with Mark Chipman. And we made one work last Tuesday when they were playing Minnesota. And that's really how it started. What I found when I got there was an incredibly open and honest, in my opinion, candid Mark Chipman. He owned up to a lot of things that maybe are the bigger issues in the market. Like if you're around a team for you and I being removed, we're not aware of as much, but, I think there's been some customer service concerns with that organization over the years, which Mark fully owned. I really sense that they've done deep soul searching, because we're at the end of a third year where this has gone in the wrong direction. Like in the pandemic, they saw a drop. Then they saw a drop the second year after that. And then last year, even a year where they made the playoffs, they saw another subsequent drop in terms of their season ticket base. They're down 27% in 3 years on season's tickets. And again, that isn't just fans. I mean, obviously that is fans. That's the average person out there that it's a lot of games. It's a lot of money. I understand they have a big number of season tickets that are basically shared by groups as a way to obviously, offset the cost, but even just to, functionally, it'd be hard to go to 41 home games a year. But there's also business concerns there, because only 15% of their season ticket base is on seats that are controlled by businesses. So, we could get into what the organization has done, but they're trying to attack those problems now. This is a huge window, right? I mean, this is the time where teams are now, sales teams within the organizations are focusing on the next season. You typically see, next season's season tickets bundled with playoff type packages. I think the Jets are going to do things like that. And Gary Bettman's coming to town this week in Winnipeg as well. And you'll be very curious to see what the commissioner has to say about the state of things, when he meets the local media there on Tuesday. So there's a lot going on. And, I was grateful for the chance to be able to go and really, I think if you read the story and you read the comments specifically from Mark Chipman, I didn't sense that he was blaming anybody. If you know what I mean? I think it's almost like when you have a real talk at your dinner table. It's just like, all right, here's the facts, and this is not in a good place. And here's, probably what we're doing wrong. Here's maybe what the fans would understand. Like, how can we bridge these gaps? And Mark Chipman himself, Julian, I led the piece with this, is currently phoning like 20 season ticket holders who've let their tickets lapse a day, and literally hearing firsthand, why those people let their tickets go, where maybe the Jets failed them, or maybe the life circumstances that changed for them that resulted in this. And obviously, and he's inviting each of those people back to attend a regular season game this season to see if the Jets can win back some of their business. So, there's a lot going on in Winnipeg, but a high level takeaway is this can't go on indefinitely. I would say that there's, they've reached kind of a low point right now. Mark Chipman hopes it's just a cycle in business and that that they'll see an upcycle and everything will move on and carry on. But it's very clear they cannot stay at the current ticket base for years and years and years and have this be a team that we're going to consider healthy and viable.
Okay, I have a ton of questions about this.
Sure.
We're both outsiders. You did allude to this. So when I look at this situation, I'm wondering, is this more on fan support or is this more on the corporate base of tickets, which is apparently really small compared to other teams around the league?
So here's the thing. Winnipeg's the smallest market in the NHL, right? And so this was always going to be a market that had less margin for error when there's a turn in the economy, when you have something like a pandemic, which none of us, of course, could have predicted. But clearly there's downstream effects for people's lives out of events like that. We've seen an inflationary environment in Canada that's even eclipsed what you have down in the US. It's more expensive to live up here now. And obviously when you get into having to make those decisions, what's the first thing you cut out? It's going to a concert. It's taking a vacation. It's going to a hockey game. I mean, that's just the reality. That's discretionary income. As much as we all love to do those things, it's not the most important thing in our life when you compare it to, like, heating your house or, having food in your fridge or all the more basic necessities, having, clothes on your back. And so, I think that ultimately the Jets have concluded that they have to do a better job with the business base. They've actually recruited 34 local business people, men and women that have, influential positions in the community. They've made them kind of ambassadors for the team. That's my term, not necessarily their term. And they want those people to basically tap into their own networks and help them sell the Jets story, help them, get some of their other corporations on board, because I think that's the best way long term to ensure stability is businesses typically can weather a change in things a little longer than an individual, right? Businesses tend to have more money in cash assets than the average person does. And so, I think that that's the first thing that they're going to try to do. I think, the second is they're trying to meet people where they are. At the beginning of this team, if you remember how they were launched, Julian, people had to make, I think it was either 3, 4, or 5-year season ticket commitments. And it happened pretty quick, like from when it was officially announced that the Thrashers were moving north, then there's this season ticket drive. It happened on a Saturday. They sold all the season tickets in 17 minutes on a Saturday. And what happened then is a lot of people did organize themselves in groups. It wasn't just like individuals buying a whole package. And over time, and it's something actually Chipman mentioned, he felt that was a strength. He thought it was a strength that they had lots of people sharing tickets. He said sort of a strength in numbers, but the bubble burst on them. That's his term, because, what happened was, let's say 1 or 2 people in a group move out of town. Just, it's been 10, 12 years, that sort of things happens. Obviously 1 or 2 people's situations change. Maybe they have kids and they just can't use the tickets as much, or financially it's a burden, what have you. And then all those groups slowly just started falling apart. And so what Mark Chipman said to me is, those people organized themselves originally and bought season tickets. Now we have to reverse engineer it and sell maybe 6 game packages to an individual. And that's obviously pretty labor intensive. It's easier from an organization standpoint just to sell a block of season tickets. Now they're having to, I think, be more creative for what they do. And so I really don't think any one factor is to blame. Any one group is to blame. I don't think any of us question that people love the Jets. I mean, I just was in Winnipeg for a couple of days last week. Everywhere you go in that city, people are wearing the gear. Like, I'm not talking just at the game. They sold out 332 straight games. I mean, the proof of concept is there. I don't think there can be any doubt whatsoever that people love the game of hockey in Winnipeg, that they love the team, and that it can work there. But the problem is they just don't have as much of a safety net when it's not working, right? Or when it goes through a tough period. And there's all kinds of buildings around the league that were once duds that are great. I mean, I'll point to Florida. I went to so many Panthers games over the years, and I'm just like, why is there even a team here? I mean, other than it's beautiful and all that. I mean, but it just never felt like they had any buzz around the team. But look, they've had success here the last couple of seasons. Obviously got to the Cup final last year, and that building was rocking last year when I was down there in the playoffs, like legit, like alive. And so I think and I only bring that up as an instructive thing to look at and be like, okay, sometimes teams do go through these periods, but then they come out on the other side and they're great for it. And I think that's still very possible in Winnipeg, but clearly something needs to change for next season. I think that they need to see a positive tick up, just more ticket revenue coming through the door. And they're not going to raise prices by meaningful amounts. So it's going to have to come through more people physically getting in that building. And I think they're hoping it's going to be with more businesses buying into what they're doing. And obviously, maybe some individuals in the community, seeing this situation for what it is and realizing, it only works if the community itself supports a team. There's no way around it. If they don't sell tickets, the NHL is I think Sportico it's funny. I just saw it on the weekend. It was after I wrote the story, but Sportico had a thing out. It said 45% of NHL revenues come from gates. Almost half of the business is people buying tickets. So, if they're just, if people aren't buying tickets to the games over a long period of time, I'm not saying that the Jets are moving next week. It's nothing. I don't think that that's what's in the offing here. But if this trend does not reverse itself, we're going to be having, this won't be the last conversation we're going to be having about the state of the team, the future of the team, and all those things.
What can you tell us about Gary Bettman being in town in Winnipeg this week?
He's going to meet with some local sponsors. So when we talk about the business interest getting engaged, I think that there's an opportunity to do it there. What's very fascinating to me is they're actually opening the arena early before Tuesday's game against St. Louis. And Bettman is going to have kind of like a fireside type of chat that fans are welcome to listen to. And I don't recall ever hearing him do that. Bettman visits every market every season, right? He drops in. You've probably seen him in Calgary or your time in Montreal as a reporter. He'll usually meet the media in an informal way. Obviously does things with the ownership. And these are normal visits, but what isn't normal is that he's having this chat, presumably about the health of the franchise or where things are going or what needs to change or, what the league's view on all this is. And fans are welcome to listen to it. He's going to speak with reporters, and you can only imagine. This story, I even underestimated the reaction it would get locally. Obviously I knew it was a unique opportunity to speak to, an owner of a team whilst things aren't going great. And that person was as open as Mark Chipman was with me. I knew that was the makings of a story that would have some impact, but it set off a torrent of conversation. Some of the local writers and look, I don't take this personally, weren't happy that they weren't the ones having that discussion with ownership rather than someone like me, who's a national writer who lives elsewhere. So I think the tone of that Gary Bettman press conference will be very interesting. And I'm curious to see what he says. I dug up an old quote that didn't really register at the time, but when the team came back from Atlanta, Gary Bettman said, if the building isn't full, this isn't going to work very well. And that quote at the time almost was meaningless because they sold all those season ticket packages in 17 minutes. They had a wait list, right? It didn't look like it was relevant, but you fast forward 13 years and it's relevant because the Jets have the second lowest attendance this season out of everyone in the league but Arizona, and they're playing out of a college rink. And so, the ticket prices in Winnipeg are the second lowest in Canada, at least according to Mark Chipman. I don't have, there's a lot of mystery. Anytime we get into attendance stories or ticketing, like there's kind of a black box there, right? We don't get to see the actual numbers, but I certainly take him at his word. Why would he lie about that? And so what you have is they've had declining revenues. And this is what I will say. This is again, as an outsider, what I see is in the face of declining revenues, they're still spending money. Like they're still operating, because some businesses go into a tailspin. I'm not just talking about pro sports, but when you don't have to bring as much money in the door, what do? Well, you cut your costs, right? But the problem is when you cut your costs, your product usually gets weaker, your service gets weaker, and all those things. The Jets, I hadn't been to that building since before the pandemic, probably been 3 or 4 years since I was last in Winnipeg. The building has been upgraded in a noticeable fashion if you haven't been there in a couple of years. They've invested in lounges and things that are meeting the customers' needs in a different way. We know that they signed Hellebuck and Scheifele to big, $120 million worth of combined contracts in October. They extended Nino Niederreiter in December. They made a trade for Sean Monahan. They're spending right at the cap ceiling. Essentially, they're doing, and they're one of the best performing teams in the Western Conference at the moment. So let's, in the face of what hasn't been great for them business wise, they're actually still operating the way you would want your team to operate. They're not getting cheap on you. They're not, trying to serve up some of the rosters we see around the league right now. They are resisting going into a rebuild. And I know people question them on that. I think it's so smart. I just look at where we're at with some of these rebuilds. The Buffalo Sabres have not played a playoff game since Winnipeg re-entered the league. Like, put your mind around that. And do you know what the other team is that's down near the bottom of attendance? It's Buffalo. And that's a great hockey market, much like Winnipeg. That's a place where people love the game, where there's a rich history, where the team's been there a long time. But, that team has been nowhere from nowhere for 15 years. And I think that's the danger is for the teams that go total scorched earth is it can take a long, long, long time. You might never get there. I mean, Buffalo's had they've also had like multiple first overall picks, a second overall pick in that cycle, and still haven't been able to pull themselves out of it. And I'm not trying to pick on the Sabres for this conversation, but I'm saying, Winnipeg has remained competitive. I mean, they've missed the playoffs the odd year, but they've never torn it down. They're still out there making trades. Obviously, I don't think Winnipeg's ever going to be the hottest destination for free agents, but I think that I see a team that's actually been pretty well managed from a hockey operations standpoint, given some of the challenges they might have unique to their market. And look, they could win a Stanley Cup this year. I mean, I'm not predicting that, but they're in the pretty large group of teams that I think have a puncher's chance at it. And so, that's a long way of saying they are not, they haven't responded to the financial challenges by getting cheap or, because I think that would be doomsday. That would be a death spiral, right? Because then if you're not putting a product on the ice that's worth even watching, I mean, what's everyone even doing there? So look, I'm honestly rooting for them. I can say that, I think. I mean, it's maybe a little unprofessional, but I love going to games in that city. I was there the day they came back, like the first game they played back from Atlanta. I was there for an outdoor game that they played. I was there in the 2018 playoffs in the conference final against Vegas, covered that series. It's an awesome place to watch a game. And it'll probably be awesome this spring too. Like I have to believe, even with some of the challenges, even with where the market is at, even with some of the controversy, I'll maybe call it, around these comments from Mark Chipman. I mean, if you're a fan of that team, you got to look at it like when the playoffs started, you're not going to want to go to a game. And even the game I was at against Minnesota last week, I have to say it wasn't quite a sellout. They're about 1,000 fans short of a sellout, give or take, but it was still loud, and they had a big win that night. And there's a rivalry with Minnesota, and they were, taunting Ryan Hartman, who of course was involved with the Cole Perfetti high stick earlier this season.
Remember.
Like my point is that the building was alive again for that game. And so I'm hoping that maybe this story like this comes out. Obviously there's going to be more discussion with Bettman in town this week, but that it quickly starts transitioning to Winnipeg bouncing back from a business standpoint. I mean, that's where I hope it gets to. I hope we're not talking at some point about them leaving town again. I don't think it's at that point just yet, where that's like a real conversation that's happening. But, the market has to go to games. At the end of the day, and I'm not taking shots at any fans or anything. I get it. Like times are tough out there. I live a good life. If I had to pay for tickets, I couldn't pay for a whole season's worth of tickets. And so that's what I'm saying. I'm not being hard or trying to lean on anyone who's in a difficult spot, because I realize a lot of people out there really are struggling. But between the business interests, between maybe some fans that can do it, I just think the community has to rally around the team, or at some point we're going to be talking, unfortunately, about the team leaving town again if that doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's the thing that makes this so strange for me following this story. I'm so used to following teams with attendance issues because the team isn't performing well, or the ownership isn't willing to spend. The way that you've detailed it, it seems as if the Jets are doing those things, and maybe fans might feel a little differently about how they've gone about some of those things. But we're looking at a team on the ice that's playing really well. Even last year, before they collapsed partway through, they were playing very well, and they're still going through some of this. I sympathize for fans as they have to worry about their team's future, even though there's some of them. I mean, we know the attendance issues are there, and it's more of a business thing, but there are fans that do show up to games, that are fans of the team, that care about the team, and they have to go through this again. Like this is really tough for them. I sympathize for them.
Yeah, and look, it's a touchy subject. I mean, Mark, towards the end of the interview, like it grew a little more emotional.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean tears, but I could feel like, look, there's no way he wanted to have that conversation with me or anybody else, right? I mean, it's a sign of how bad things are that you get to a point where that conversation can happen. But one thing that he said that really stuck with me, he's like, I'm still looking for the words to put to this. Like for people that live there, this is a really emotional thing. I mean, Mark Chipman, when he was in his 30s, got involved in the mid 90s with the Save the Jets campaign. He was part of the group of local business people who tried to save the Jets originally, and they were ultimately unsuccessful. Obviously then he set, it kind of gave him purpose in terms of he got the arena built downtown. He's obviously partnered with people in town. He got the AHL team there. He got to the point where the NHL could come back. He's now, 12, 13 years in on this with an NHL team. This guy's invested his adult life into this thing. And he knows that it's a sensitive subject, that if there's even the sort of idea that there's a threat the team could leave, like that the fans could turn on that or not be put out by that. And he said he's still searching for the right words to use. And so I don't know. It's pro sports is a lot of things, right? At the end of the day, it is just a business. I mean, ultimately the issues he's talking to me about, it could be any business anywhere. I mean, basically it's a decline in money through the door. It's concern about if they can keep doing the things they need to run the business properly with that amount of money coming through the door. I mean, it on one hand, it's just pure economics. It's just dollars and cents. But on the other, we're talking about pride in a community. We're talking about something that I think gives Winnipeg a sense of self. I think a lot of people are proud of that team, and obviously it's something you pass on between generations. Hopefully the team's there in 50 years. So there's a lot going on there. And as I say, I think my story, I guess, shone the flashlight on it last week, but I think this is going to be an ongoing conversation there.